hello there, everybody. Welcome to Spoiler Piece Theater, the podcast that doesn't give a shit about spoilers. We just want to talk about the movies. My name is Dave Riedel. I write about movies. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association. That's what we're called, right? And my pronouns are he, him.
My name is Evan Crean. I am co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, co-author of Your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living. I'm co-host of the It's the Pictures podcast, and my pronouns are he, him.
Yes, this week is a duo.
Yes.
There's no Megan. She is off this week.
Vacaying.
Although, isn't her life a vacation because she lives next door to Disney World?
Perhaps.
I haven't asked her that before. I should ask her that. Megan, I'm just joking because I know you'll listen to this episode. But so anyway, yeah. So she's gone this week. She'll be back next week. And this week we decided to, for better or worse, watch a couple of movies.
Yes.
But before we talk about the movies we watched for this week, I want to mention that over on the Patreon, Evan and I decided to watch the Tony Scott film Deja Vu, starring Denzel, because I think that Tony Scott only cast Denzel Washington in his movies after a certain point.
Yeah.
And we had a lively conversation about the movie's like what the fuck plot and its weird male gaze and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So
it was a good time.
Yeah, we enjoyed it. So if you're a patron, please check that out. And if you're not a patron, please consider becoming one. It's $5 a month. There's an extra episode over there every week. There's polls to vote in. It's a good time. So, movies this week. I can't believe that this is a movie we're covering on Spoiler Piece, but I saw Dogman.
Yeah, you did.
And then Evan and I both saw Love Me, which is Kristen Stewart and Stephen. How do you pronounce his last name? Yeun?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I like him a lot. I wish he was in more stuff, or at least more stuff that I knew was out there. Because I don't plan on watching The Walking Dead. Just so you know.
No. Have you watched Beef? That's a good show.
Oh, I've heard that's really good.
With Ali Wong.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to watch that. But anyway, we're here to talk about Dogman first. So if you don't know what Dogman is, that's probably because you don't have children.
But I don't. So please, you're going to have to tell me what Dogman is.
Okay, so Dogman, I'll read the description of the IMDb description of the movie, and then I will kind of get into a little more of I don't want to use the word lore, but little Dogman lore.
Okay.
So Dogman, half dog and half man, he is sworn to protect and serve as he doggedly pursues the feline supervillain Petey the Cat. By the way, Petey the Cat, so there's another children's cartoon and book series called Pete the Cat.
Yes.
And it's about a very nice blue cat who likes to surf and play guitar. And it's kind of boring and whatever. And then you've got Dogman, and the villain is Petey the Cat. So he's this orange cat who's evil. It's really kind of funny. And in the movie, he is voiced by Pete Davidson.
Of course he is.
And I have to say, I have never seen Pete Davidson act and thought, yeah, Pete Davidson. But you know what? He is fucking great as Petey the Cat. It's like he made the correct decision, I think. You know, the movie's full of jokes, and he's just like, I'm going to play this like it's a fucking drama. You know, like Petey the Cat is just, you know, it's funny. And I'll let the jokes carry themselves by playing it straight. Yeah. And by the way, the book series is written by a guy named Dave Pilkey, but he spells with no E. So I thought that his name was Dav Pilkey, which thank God I never said out loud. But then I saw an interview with him, like, oh, the creative Dogman, Dave Pilkey. I'm like, Dave? What the fuck is this?
I think you mean Dav.
Yeah. You mean Dav Pilkey? Jesus. So the Dogman books, there's like 12 or 13 of them at this point. And it all begins with this conceit is that there's a cop whose name, I don't remember what his first name is, but Officer Knight. And then there's a dog, Greg the dog. And Officer Knight is a terrible cop. And Greg the dog is a really good cop. And so together they are, you know, they're kind of an okay cop.
How do they get combined?
Well, here we go. And this is straight out of the books. And I remember I didn't want Henry to read this for the longest time because I was like, this is gross. But it's all done with this just like intentionally corny animation style. So you really can't take it seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is they're chasing, I don't remember if it's, I don't think they're chasing Petey the cat because I think he's in cat jail when the movie starts, but don't quote me on it. Because yes, there is a separate jail called cat jail. So anyway, yeah. So Officer Knight and Greg are in their squad car and they're chasing a villain. It might be Petey the cat. I don't remember. And they find this bomb on top of an abandoned factory that's actually called the Abandoned Factory. It like says on the front, the Abandoned Factory or whatever it's called. And they try to defuse the bomb. And Officer Knight is talking to Greg. He's like, all right, which wire do I cut? And Greg is like, and he's like, that's right, the green wire. Always cut the green wire. And he cuts the wire. He's like, wait a minute, dogs are colorblind. Boom. So they end up in the hospital and there's a doctor and a nurse there. And the doctor says, well, the results of the explosion are pretty bad. So Officer Knight, your head is basically dying and is going to die, but your body's okay. And Greg the dog, your head is okay, but your body's died. Or I've mixed them up because whatever. So the nurse is like, hey, I have an idea. Why don't we take the dog's head and put it on Officer Knight's body, and then he'll be a dog man. And the doctor's, it's one of those things in the movie where it goes silent and the doctor's just like looking at the nurse for like 6 seconds. And then she's like, yeah, let's do it. So they sew Greg's head onto Officer Knight's body and he's dog man. So
does he have any of the memories of Officer Knight or is he just strictly
he remembers Officer Knight as Officer Knight. Like he
gotcha. Okay. So he's not like his personality isn't like part of
he's still just Greg the dog, but they call him Dog Man.
Gotcha. Okay.
I don't know why you wouldn't still call him Greg, but maybe because he's got Officer Knight's body.
I guess so.
He goes to their old home and his girlfriend is already like moved out and the realtor's there and she's like, oh yeah. So, I mean, the things, I can't believe this isn't a children's movie and it's not like inappropriate or anything. It's just kind of bleak.
Yeah.
The realtor's like, so anyway, her fiance was a cop and he died in the line of duty. And she said, well, I'm not going to be alone. So she already found a new boyfriend and moved to a new house. It's like, oh God. And so Dogman finds his own house and there's a whole gag. It looks like a dog house, but when you go inside, it's like palatial. And every character who goes into it's like, wow, there's a lot of room in here,
Yeah.
And it's just full of like ridiculous jokes. And I didn't think I was going to like it. I thought this was going to be torture. And I don't know how good it is, but I was won over by this movie, mostly because of Pete Davidson as Petey the cat. And one of the things that he does in the movie, this is amazing. So he decides he's having a lot of trouble like getting rid of Dogman and taking over the world. And by the way, he has a hideout and it has a bunch of flashing neon signs that say above it, this is Petey the cat's hideout. It's just like one of the jokes in the movie, which is that joke is in the books. And so anyway, Petey clones himself, but his clone comes out as a kitten. And he's like, what is this? And the machine like prints out a thing. It's like, yes, in 18 years, it'll be an exact clone of you. And he's like, oh man. So he's basically got like a kid he's got to take care of, but the kid is like not evil. Yeah. He's just like a nice, sweet kid. And he's like, Papa. And he's like, no. I'm not your papa. You're me. You're just younger, And so there's that whole thing. And Little Petey is what they call him. I don't remember how this happens. He becomes friends with Dogman. He starts living with Dogman. He starts fighting crime with Dogman. And Petey, well, because Petey keeps going to jail. He gets arrested. He gets thrown in
a laundry basket, an overturned laundry basket.
Exactly. So one of the ways he gets out is there's a character named Big Jim who comes up in some of the later books, and he's a big cat. And Petey's in cat jail, and they're like, Petey always finds a way to escape. Well, we got him this time. We did X, Y, and Z. And so then you see that Petey's sitting on a seesaw, and he's like, hey, Jim, come over and be on the other side of the seesaw. And he sits down, and you see Petey like flying through the air over the walls of cat jail, and he just goes, so long, suckers, which is his big, phrase. He must say it like 5 times in the movie because he gets out of cat jail almost immediately every time they put him in there. And the movie ends up with them accidentally bringing this evil fish back to life, voiced by Ricky Gervais, who brings all these buildings to life and is going to destroy the city with the buildings and then take all the, they're going to drop them in a volcano or something like that. I don't know.
Okay.
It's so outrageous. And I don't mean it's outrageous like, I can't fucking believe they did this. But the story is just, it's one of those things where you're like, you actually say to yourself, how did Dave Pilkey think this up? How did he decide that there was going to be like a reanimator spray that you can get from the Reanimator factory and you can spray it? I think it's called a live spray. It's called something like that, or Realive spray. And so you spray it on something dead and it comes back to life. So Petey has found this evil fish and he's throwing it in the factory for some reason I can't remember, but he throws it in the wrong place and it gets into the stuff and it gets, it's alive, and then it's Ricky Gervais and it flies for no reason that anyone can comprehend. And he gets a live spray on all these buildings and the buildings come to life and they fight with Dogman because he creates a giant robot called ADHD, the number 80, and then the letters HD.
I see.
And it can do anything you want it to. You'll be like, ADHD, go find out, go find the cheapest milk in the city, and he'll bring it back. It's just like, that's not in the movie, but the gag is it can literally do anything. And there's another great gag because Petey decides he doesn't want to have a clone. How can I undo it? And he looks in the catalog where he got the cloning machine, and it says, eraser or backspace button sold separately or something, delete button sold separately. So he's like, oh, so he mail orders it. And at the end of the movie, it arrives and he picks it up out of the box and he's like, oh, he doesn't want to delete little Petey because they've become, father and son, and Dogman has visitation. And the whole series of books hinges on, Petey becoming evil again and then not being evil. And then he's not evil anymore for forever. And then they have to introduce other characters who are evil. I mean, it's insane. But the thing that I love so much about it is it just treats all of this stuff like it's completely normal. And the police chief is played by Lil Ray Howery, which I think is funny. And he loves Dogman, but he doesn't want Dogman to lick the inside of his mouth.
I think that's fair.
Yeah. Anyway, it's just goofy. It's fun. I don't think I can recommend this to adults, but if you have kids like I do, they loved it. They didn't talk for, 90 minutes or however long it is, which is, if you have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, you will know that's a fucking miracle. And afterwards, I asked my older guy, Henry, if he wanted to be on Spoiler Piece, and he's like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to be on Spoiler Piece. And that's kind of how when he knows he's telling you something you don't want to hear, that's kind of how he talks. I don't know if I want to be on Spoiler Piece, Dad. Well, why not? Well, I don't really know if I have anything to say about Dogman. I mean, it's really great, but I don't know. And then Ted's like, I'll do it. I'm like, no, we're not. It's the two of you or none of you. And he was like, okay, so yeah. So we had
I would have been curious to hear Ted's solo review.
I mean, the thing about Ted is both of them have the gift of gab when they want to. Ted's is not as robust as Henry's, but if you get Ted going on a subject he loves, like money, that's right. My 6-year-old loves money. I bought him a toy ATM for Christmas, and it was the gift he likes most in the world. It's like
He's
a piggy
constantly
bank.
making withdrawals from it.
No, he got all of his money from his piggy bank and put it in the ATM, and every once in a while he'll get out. It's got a card, and you have to insert it and type the pin in to get your money out, and then the drawer opens, and then he'll get his money out, and he'll count it, and then put it back.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, that's Ted. So anyway, that's Dogman, and let's move on. What do you say?
Okay.
Let's move.
It sounds like you had a good time, at least.
I did have a good time. I think if I had seen it by myself, I wouldn't have had such a good time. But like knowing that the boys were there with me, really enjoying it too, actually was kind of fun. And I'm glad that they're at that age now where I can take them places.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's move on to Love Me. This
Okay.
is a movie. Let me get your one sentence IMDb summary up here. A post-apocalyptic romance in which a buoy, like a buoy, B-U-O-Y,
Yep.
and a satellite meet online and fall in love after the end of human civilization.
Mm-hmm.
This is written and directed by Andrew and Sam Zucchero, starring Kristen Stewart and Steve Yen. And it is exactly what it says it is.
Yeah.
She is a buoy that I can't remember why she was long. Oh, to track the temperature of the ocean.
Yeah. And as it mentions, this is the world has ended. The movie starts kind of like it goes into the past and says something like 5 billion years ago, and then you see like the planet spinning, and then we get to like all kinds of like sounds and things like that, and we get to sometime in what seems like the 23rd century, but the world ends, I guess, in the movie somewhere in this year, in 2027 or something like that. So a couple of years from now. Yeah. And it doesn't explain exactly what happens. It kind of, there's like a video that the satellite has, because like the satellite's thing is like, oh, if anybody comes to Earth and wants to know about what Earth was like, I have all of this information, stored on my hard drive and can tell you all about humans and Earth. And she starts watching like a YouTube video of like, oh, here's what, why I exist. Here's what happened. And then like, right as it's getting to the like on, blah, 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 an extinction event happened. And then like, she just skips to the next video, which is like, babies laughing or something like that.
Yeah.
So we don't find out exactly how the Earth ended, but she's like a buoy that's been stuck in the ice. And I think the ice melts.
I guess there was a second ice age or something. That's or a nuclear winter. I don't know.
Something. So it melts. She comes back online and she just starts like pinging, then meets the satellite, and the satellite's like, I'm here to like connect with a life form. Are you a life form? And she's like, no. And he's like, okay, bye. She's like, wait a minute. Maybe I am life form. Maybe I am life form. And like hooks up to him and the internet and starts like exploring and learning about things. And she finds the Kristen Stewart
Deja and Liam. No, it's well, they have Instagram, but it's primarily a YouTube channel. It's one of those like couples that has a YouTube channel,
right? That they're like influencer people. And so there's Deja, like you said, Kristen Stewart and Liam. And so she just kind of like loves their whole vibe, their whole like relationship. And they have all these like silly videos like, oh, we're watching Friends, and they're like singing the Friends theme song, and we're making like Blue Apron meals together and all that. So she like assimilates all that and is like, that's me, that's who I am. So I'll just like contact the satellite and say, I'm a human, this is who I am, and like form some type of relationship there.
Yeah, by the way, I'm still not entirely sure. This relationship is all happening on his hard drive? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it seems...
Is he a hotspot?
It seems to be, yeah. I think that's one of the parts that's a little bit difficult to parse. Like, yeah, is the satellite the internet, or for all intents and purposes, it says somewhere in there that he has 1.2 petabytes of information, which is a lot of information. But yeah, is it its own functioning internet or intranet or something? Because it seems to me
sentient also. I mean,
yeah, it seems like they create their own like new Instagram accounts inside this world and start making posts and having like interactions. And it's like she's driving them at first. She's kind of like, talk to me, let's like be friends, like let's like each other's posts, like why don't you post something that you think is interesting? And he like fails utterly at that.
Yeah, Yeah. Whereas she's not really doing any. She's just assimilating, basically.
Right.
Information.
She's just kind of taking all of like Deja's persona and just making it her own persona. And so the movie it has kind of like three phases to it. Like the first phase is like the buoy and the satellite. The second phase is when they transition into being like virtual entities, like animated characters within this like world that they create together, where they become like animated versions of Kristen Stewart and Steven Yeun. And they exist in that world for a little while, where they're basically just mimicking all of the things that Deja and Liam would do, until the satellite Steven Yeun is kind of like, none of this feels real to me. What is going on here? Like, who are you as a person? Like, he develops like a higher level of sentience through this, where he's kind of like, this is all like bullshit. I want to actually do things and like use this space to like be creative. And she's kind of like, no.
Yeah, she doesn't want to do it.
And she's also like afraid to tell him that like I basically ripped off my whole persona from this person.
Yeah, and she becomes. This is like one of the things that actually it kind of made me a little sad. She becomes really, really depressed and sinks to the ocean and can't link to him for 1 billion years. And then the only reason that she's able to come back and find him is because the ocean basically is the planet becomes desert.
Yeah.
And so by virtue of just being uncovered, he is able to contact her again. And this time when they come back, they're Kristen Stewart and Steve Yeun.
Right. Because in the intervening time, basically, like, he realized that he could use the world, and he like completely tears down the apartment and like rebuilds it from the ground up, and realizes he can rebuild this world. And there's this whole like great scene where he's like, I want water. Water doesn't ever run from the tap when I try to turn on the faucet. So I'm going to make water. And he's just sitting there like sipping different glasses. Like, is this what water should taste like? Oh, no, too bitter. Gross. Is this what water should taste like? No. Okay, that's too salty. Is this what? Oh, yes, perfect. I perfected water. All right, next task.
Yeah. And that's actually a really cute moment when he says to her, like, would you like a glass of water? And she's like, what? And because she knows what water is, but obviously she's never had it. Well, I guess she was sunk in the ocean, so she definitely knows what water is.
Yeah.
And then he's like, and it gets warm too. And he like runs her a bath, and then you see her fully clothed, like jump into the bathtub. And he invents, he finds ice cream, how to make ice cream, because that's one of the things that he did like from Deja and Liam.
Yeah, I think that's my favorite moment in the movie, is that he makes her a whole ice cream tasting. He just takes all the ice cream out of the freezer and like lines it up and is like, try all of this stuff. Like, it's going to blow your mind.
Yeah. And that was really sweet. And then it gets a little sad, because she realizes that she's like, I got to tell him that I, am just this buoy, but she doesn't want to. And she's afraid that he'll hate her. And,
but he already knows.
But he already knows, because he found everything. And the first thing he says to her when she gets back, she's like, are you mad at me? He's like, no, I mean, it's been a really long time.
He said it's been like 1 billion years.
Yeah.
That's what he says to her. And I laughed, because I'm like, yeah, it actually was 1 billion years.
Yeah. So he's not mad at her, but he keeps telling her that, I want you to be yourself. And she's like, this is who I am. And he's like, no, it's not. And so they have this basically existential argument over what makes you you. And she is worried that he hates her for some reason,
right.
Which feels kind of irrational, considering they're the only two beings in the entire world, but okay.
Right. And especially when he was so excited to see her and wanted to share all these things with her.
Yeah. Which, she's kind of hung up on. She's worried that he's, going to find out that she's not Deja, which he didn't like Deja anyway.
Yeah.
He
hated that. He hated all that stuff. It just, he didn't like onesies and date night and all that just crap.
Yeah. Because then the second part of the movie that Evan was talking about, when they're, animated or computer animated or whatever, they spend the entire time trying to recreate these YouTube videos at her, urging. So Yeah.
Yeah, including like, oh, let's make this quesadilla recipe over and over again. And he tastes it and he's like, this isn't spicy. And he's like, maybe I'll just add and she's like, no, you've got to follow the recipe exactly.
Yeah. She's definitely wants to be in control about this. And I don't really know what the end game is. Is it just to feel like a person? I mean,
I guess so.
yeah.
I mean, to feel like a person, to have a person, to have someone to share with, share things with.
I guess so. I mean, I guess you don't really have to have a reason. I do have a question though. This is a actual practical question.
Mhm.
Why did they make the buoy look like a minion?
It does look a little bit like a minion.
Yeah. It looks a little bit like a buoy and a little bit like a minion. But anyway, am I to understand that the movie ends with the sun becoming a red giant and blowing them out into space?
Yes,
And
I think so.
They're still living on the hard drive?
That's the thing that's confusing to me. I think that's my biggest question / problem with this movie is that by the time they reconcile, we see that red giant closing in and swallowing up Earth, and you see the satellite kind of like jettisoning all of its parts, including the drive or the screen or whatever, everything it's stored, and that starts to float out into space. But like the next scene we see, they're together and they're in this world that's completely different. They look like they're in like New York or somewhere, and it's
in
very,
like a really nice
sunny,
apartment,
and they're happy. And because right before the sun kind of like swallows them up, he says like, we have all the time in the world now. And so like, yeah, what is that? Is that drive just floating? What's powering it? Like, how is it existing? How are they existing? That's the part to me that just I don't understand about this movie. It's my biggest question / problem.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is an interesting idea, but there's just so much of it. It's not interesting enough for me to not sit there and ask all those questions and therefore get distracted from what's going on screen, because I'm like, this doesn't really, like, how is there an internet? How is there?
I think I struggle with that too. Like how do they have Instagram where they can create new accounts on Instagram on this device?
Yeah.
Like internet requires servers with information in places, and I can say, okay, I'll suspend my disbelief enough to say whatever this drive is on the satellite has made its own kind of weird internet where you can do stuff in there. You can somehow post new content, but like where do things go if it's just floating? The drive is just floating in the middle of the space.
Yeah. It's I don't know. It's too bad.
It is. I think it's an interesting idea for sure, and I think it is very slow despite being a short movie, despite being like an hour and a half. So I think that those were two of my complaints. It's slow. I think the score is very overbearing. I don't know how you felt about it.
Oh my God. How much piano can one man handle?
I was reading about this in the press notes that apparently it's a 4-handed piano score. Do you think you're a musician. Do you feel like that's why it's so overbearing?
Well, it's also like constant.
Right.
I think that it would be too much as like a 2-person thing. Also, I don't even know you're playing you're playing a melody and a counter melody and you're both playing
I guess
bass.
there were two different piano players playing at the same time or something like that.
Yeah.
I guess they were saying it like artistically it was like the two personas like intertwined and like moving through this story together was like what they were intending by it, but I feel like it was just overbearing.
Yeah, it just feels like there's a lot of piano music.
Yeah.
So, I mean, some of it kind of you don't notice, but some of it is really distracting because it's so prevalent.
Yeah.
And it also seems just not the right tone. You know?
I think so. It feels too on the nose is the word that is the term that I'm thinking of, where it feels like, I think this debuted at Sundance, last Sundance, not this one. And it feels very Sundancey. Like, okay, let's have this movie about a buoy and a satellite that fall in love. Let's have this like really intense piano score. It feels just pretentious to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it would have been better served by a spare, something that's pretty spare.
Yeah, because you
You
want to
know?
let the performances carry it through, which I think the reason that I found this watchable in any kind of way is because I think Kristen Stewart and Steven Yeun are very strong performers. And I
Absolutely.
liked seeing them together, and I think they actually had good chemistry.
Yes.
I think, she is really good at embodying like the existential crisis of all of this so well in these moments where she's like talking to herself. And I thought that he was really strong in the segment after she disappears from him
Mm-hmm.
and he's on his own and he's first grieving and then he's kind of channeled this energy into creation
Mm-hmm.
and like finding himself and like building this world, and all of that was really interesting to watch and not easy to do acting by yourself. I think both of them in this movie are acting by themselves in certain points, and I think
Right.
were they not stronger performers, were these different actors, I don't think this movie would work at all.
Yeah. The only part that I was really, I can't say that I enjoyed it, but I was compelled to continue watching the last bit when they are Kristen Stewart and Steve Yeun.
Mm-hmm.
Partly because they're both so good looking, but also because, like you said, they're really good performers. I think that she's really good in this. I haven't actually seen a lot of Kristen Stewart stuff. I know that she's, one of the gags about Twilight is she's got all these nervous tics, her character does, or something like that. And I mean, she doesn't do any of that in this. And what's the movie where she can, like, she's a psychic, not a psychic, she can feel ghosts or whatever? Personal Shopper.
Oh, yep. Mm-hmm.
That's a really good movie, and she's really great in it. And I haven't seen too much Steve Yeun stuff, but I like him a lot. So, and he's very good in this. And I think you're right. I think that trying to hold the screen while you're acting and you're the only person there, yikes.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially
you better have some
when
charisma.
Exactly. And also when you're like a CG character
Mhm.
because there's parts where they're CG, and I was reading that they apparently the buoy and the satellite stuff were like practical effects things, like the buoy they actually built and shot like in places, and the animated part they actually had them in motion capture suits walking around and they like animated over them, which I think
that comes off.
I think it comes off, but I think also another reason why that section kind of worked for me because it felt like they were giving real performances despite being animated characters.
Yeah, it didn't feel like just voiceover work.
Right. It allowed their personality to continue to come through.
Mm-hmm. It was also interesting that when they were animated, she didn't look like Kristen Stewart at all at first, and she started to look more and more like her as it went on. But he looked like Steve Yeun from the moment,
Oh, totally.
He's there.
Yeah,
I don't know
especially his like eyebrows. The way they like animated his eyebrows, I thought was so him.
Yeah. Now I don't know what the purpose of any of that is, but it worked for me.
Yeah. Well, I kind of felt like the progression was like, I use this phrase all the time, fake it till you make it. For them, it was kind of like they became animated characters and then they like continued to try and like exist and explore existence until they became like real physical people living in this world.
Right. But are they just avatars still?
I don't know.
I mean, they have feelings and can think and things like that. So
yeah. I think they became real by sheer like force of will.
Force of will.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think that if this were more compelling overall, I really wouldn't care, but I'm kind of stuck on the, like, this doesn't fucking, like, is he writing his own program for the two of them? Like, cause she can't do any of that stuff. So,
right.
Yeah, I just sound like a fucking idiot. So, because it's like, how did it work with the science? It's like, who fucking cares? It's a movie.
Yeah, it's a movie. You definitely have to suspend some disbelief.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're not acquainted with whatever his programming is. We're not ever told like, oh, I'm at some advanced artificial intelligence that also just happens to like be running this satellite.
Yeah. Well, and
He
it's
himself says like, oh, I'm just like a helper, basically. I'm
isn't there
here to help.
isn't there a scene from the Terminator in this with Kyle Reese being like, we could spot the old Terminators because they had rubber skin, but these new ones, I mean, they've got blah and bad breath, everything. And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah. And then the movie uses that as sort of a link almost to them becoming more human. And it's like,
Mhm.
isn't this kind of cheating to like use the Terminator? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, why does Kyle Reese explain this to me? Shouldn't fucking Kristen Stewart and Steve Yeun explain this to me? Or Bowie and, well, their names are Me. The Love Me.
Yeah.
It's kind of a twofold thing. It's like Love Me, and then her name, she calls herself Me.
Right.
And
And
his
he's
name is I Am, which is, I mean, it's supposed to be cute. It's really kind of painful though.
Yeah, it's corny.
Yeah, corny's a good word. Any spray. What else? What else you got for Love Me?
I mean, I think we've covered it. Honestly, like I wanted to like this a lot more.
Yeah, me too.
I thought it sounded like a great idea on paper, even though I was also kind of dubious because I'm like, it also seems like it could go awry.
Yeah, well, I mean, the good thing about it is I feel like, yes, a movie like this could be absolutely wretched, you know?
Mhm.
And it's not. You know,
No.
it just kind of doesn't hold together. I think the performances are really strong, especially at the end when she's like losing her mind.
Mhm.
And she's creating a wedding for them, and
Right.
Liam and Deja's wedding, but she's creating a wedding for them. And then she's like, we have a baby. And he's like, what, we have a baby? He's like, yeah, a little girl. She's like, unless you want a boy or non-binary. And he's
Yeah.
like, no, I don't. And he's like, or it's a cat. And then you see like cat's paws, like coming out of this like bassinet.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of funny at the same time. But I mean, Kristen Stewart really sells the whole like existential crisis thing. I
She
think.
does. And I think the visual effects are overall strong in this movie and very strong in that particular sequence you're referencing, where we're seeing all of this happening. It's all kind of flashing in front of them. And so, like, they're in their apartment still, but like their wedding is happening. People are popping up and throwing rice at them. But when he's handed his vows, all of a sudden he's wearing a tuxedo. People throw rice at them. She throws a bouquet. There's someone getting sick in the bathroom. There's people dancing through the kitchen. It's all just like happening, and it's actually, I think, well choreographed and edited together to make it feel
Yeah.
like it's one stream of consciousness that's happening.
Yeah. But you know, it's got all the problems we said it did. So
Yep. Unfortunately,
yeah.
the end of the day.
Yeah. A buoy. I wonder why a buoy. Why not two satellites? Why not two buoys? Buoy and buoy.
Hmm.
My name's Buoy. My name's Buoy. That's fucking crazy.
I'm Buoy 1 and Buoy 2. Oh, okay.
There's no swearing in this movie. That's kind of a bummer. All movies need swearing except Dogman.
Dogman does not need swearing.
Well, you know how like a lot of times when I'm paraphrasing dialogue, I
Right.
do it with lots of like F-bombs and stuff.
Mhm.
Imagine if I did that with Dogman. It's like, oh, my fucking head died or whatever. You know, that's not cool, Dave. So you got to keep it friendly for the kids.
Mhm.
All right. Well, I think we've covered everything this week. Yes.
Yeah, I think we've gotten to it.
Okay. So, wanted to thank our sponsor piece patron, Heather Sachs. Heather, thank you so much for being our sponsor piece patron. Would love it.
Thank you, Heather.
Want to thank our editor, the very talented Otto Clammer, who does all the heavy lifting for us each week. Thank you, Otto.
Thanks, Otto.
You can find Spoiler Piece Theater anywhere you get podcasts. Our website is spoilerpiece.com. On social media, we're Spoiler Piece Theater on Facebook, and we're at Spoiler Piece on, are we still on Twitter?
Yeah.
Twitter,
We're still there.
Instagram, Letterboxd, Blue Sky, and Threads. And then Blue Sky's got the extra whatever shit at the end. But if you go Blue Sky spoiler piece, you'll find us.
You'll find us.
If you'd like to email us, our email address is spoilerpiece@gmail.com. You can drop us a line. If you've seen Love Me or Dogman, you can tell us what you think of that. Or you could give us a call
at 862-21-PEACE.
Leave us a voicemail. What's that?
I was going to say, and you could leave us a voicemail.
Oh, yeah. Leave us a voicemail and let us know how did you feel when the Officer Knight's head died and Greg the dog's body lived, or whatever. I don't fucking even know. I can't hold a coherent thought right now. Also, if you like the show, please rate and review us by going to ratethispodcast.com/spoilerpiece. You can also rate us directly on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. That's really helpful to us. If you really like the show, please consider joining our Patreon. Remember, I said at the beginning we watched the Tony Scott Denzel movie Deja Vu. I was getting confused because Kristen Stewart's character's name is Deja, and then I was like, wait a minute, why am I going to say Deja Vu? That's weird.
And we ended up saying Deja Vu at the same time, which I think we did. Worked out.
Yeah. So anyway, we talked about that, and it's $5 a month to join our Patreon. It is much more loose over there, even though this show is pretty loose, especially this week. But it's pretty loose over there, and we usually watch older movies, although Deja Vu is only 19 years old, which is weird. Yep. Anyway, my name is Dave Riedel. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, and if you want to follow me on your socials, I'm Dave Sees Movies on Instagram, Letterboxd, Blue Sky, and Threads.
My name is Evan Crean. I am co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, co-author of your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living, and co-host of the It's the Pictures podcast. You can follow me on social media. That's Twitter, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and probably somewhere else I'm forgetting, as Real Recon, and that's real as in film.
Yeah. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.